And not only that is, one, how to ask for help, but two, ask me specifically for help and what I need to get from you in order to answer your questions. So this debugging window pops up, and that's all well and good. It looks like a lot of garbage for the most part, but I will show you very quickly. Hopefully this just works. Or hopefully it just breaks. Nope, that actually just works. Let me see if I can break it. We can do that. Was that outside? It should be. I know of ways to break this, so if this doesn't work, I'll do that. So we got this running. Launch that. Okay. Yeah, it seems not to care that that's not in the proper place. All right, so let's go to where our camera is saving that data to our hard drive or our storage and then retrieving that. Well, let's say, for example, I wanted to, so this is getting a path, and this path I do believe is a string. Yep, so if you hit Control Space on that, it'll pop up this autocomplete. You can see what the method is and the return type, so that's what I expected. So I can use string concatenation to just say, you know, ABC. And what this will try to do is it'll go and try to look up the actual image file, but then it'll append the ABC to the image file name. And so hopefully this will come back as a bad bitmap and crash, or at least throw an exception that I'm not currently capturing. Okay, and luckily that just, I guess, this just came in as null and everybody handled the null properly or something like that. So let me try one more thing. You'd think it'd be easier to break this stuff, but I know I'm trying to break it and it's not quite working. URI. Let's say it's a malformed. I know this will crash, I think. I say that, then it won't crash. I shouldn't even type in the HTTP in there. Okay, so oh, okay. I know why that didn't crash. Okay. Oops. I was typing in the wrong method here. My bad. Oh, that shouldn't crash. But this, I should put the URI here. URI. Make sure we use the Java version. And actually, you know what? Let's just pass in null instead of trying to be fancy. Honestly, I thought it would be easier to break this, but usually I try to avoid null. There we go. Okay, so my application's finally crashed, but before you hit that OK button, make sure that, well, don't hit the OK button, because as you see here, this is going to be the stack trace of the exception. So it's going to tell you what exception it is. Now, if you hit the OK button, if you watch that screen, it should, well, it does stay there? Okay. Until you're running. Well, sometimes it'll actually go away when you hit that OK button. I don't know why. I've never figured that out, because sometimes I'll just hit OK and I'll go to look at the stack trace and it's not there. So don't hit that OK button. That was something that Jake also confirmed, and I've seen it. But of course, now that I'm telling you, it doesn't work that way. But that's good for us because now it's there. Maybe it's a bug that they fixed in the latest Android Studio. So this is what I actually need, is this fatal exception, this Android runtime. This other stuff I don't necessarily need, but this is what's going to show you what actually happened. It says failure delivering result, result info, and then scroll over to the right here to activity. It'll tell you the activity that it happened in, so my main activity, and lang null pointer exception, and then telling you which variable was, or not variable, which object was actually null. And this is within this URI parse, because I'm passing in a null object, so you're getting the null pointer. And so that's kind of hard to track down, sort of, just based on that. But if you go down the stack trace or up the stack trace, depending upon what your perspective is, you might have to go down pretty far. So these lines of code, or these stacks here, or the methods on the stack, they might look very pretty much like garbage, like handle message. That doesn't look like any of my code. If you scroll down far enough, you should see your package name, and so in this case, that's the package name for this particular activity, and then it's being called in on activity result, and then inside it'll tell you the class and the line number of that class, so main activity.java line 80, and that's pretty much what you need right there. And of course, the stuff below it is Android calling its own methods to invoke that method, and yada yada yada. And so all that garbage in here, there's this little gem, and it's nicely highlighted blue. If we click on that, it'll bring us to that exact line of code, and we could say, well, obviously this is null here, but if it's a variable, you say, okay, well, I could swear that I'm setting that variable to some non-null value, or maybe it's being passed in as a parameter. Let's say the request code, or something like, well, that wouldn't be null. Let's say the data is null, which is often true, and you're trying to pass that in there. So you can go up the stack of who called this method, and if you're getting it from a parameter, you can say, okay, well, who's ever passing that in is passing me in a null value. So one fix for null pointer exceptions is to check for null. Just do if, and then that variable name, whatever it happens to be, let's say data in this case, if data equals, or excuse me, in this particular case, not equal to null, I just wrap that in an if statement. And so that'll take care of the case that data is being passed in as null, and therefore I shouldn't try to execute anything on that data or pass it into any other methods. Obviously, then your method, or this logic, never gets executed, so you have to maybe have an else clause in there to say, else then maybe my URI, some URI, and then is a hard-coded value, something like this, and then something like that, where you're passing in a known value or a default value. So this is how we handle null exceptions. But this will also tell you that if it's your own data that is null, why is that null? And so one of the questions that came up was, my location is null. Well, if the location's null, you can ask yourself, why is the location null? Has my GPS spun up and has received notifications yet? And if not, then why not? And so you can kind of go backwards in that stack to find out what's happening. Now, the location, I've answered this on Piazza, but let me just call it out because it kind of has a lot to do with the debugging. If you're using my buildings controller, which is not only handling the buildings array that we're storing all of our buildings / locations in, it's also handling the current user's location in this particular example. You can also get the current location from the Google Maps object as well. You can look up how to do that. I like to have a little bit more control over the location reporting, such as just give me a broad range of where I am exactly. So what you have to do before you get the user's location is call this method, start location reporting, because what that's going to do is it's going to get the location manager object and then set a listener on that location manager. And that listener is going to listen for a few things, and you define what those things are, and one of them is on location changed. This is a method that's defined in the documentation for location manager. I have, as an example, other methods that you can be listening for, so on status changed, on provider enabled, and on provider disabled. But your application will never listen for these if you don't call that. So make sure you're calling that first, passing in the activities context, usually main activity.this, usually. Just to start, it doesn't actually matter who's passing this in or who's executing this. I usually like to use the root view's context. So in this case, the root view is main activity. So call this method, start location reporting in your main activities on create. And so if we go over to, in this project, it's called maps activity. So in my maps activity, it does not look like I have done this yet. So in the on create, you would just call buildings controller dot start location reporting, and then obviously it's asking for this, so it's asking for the root. Okay, and what that's going to do again is it's going to spin up your GPS. You have a little chip on your device that gathers GPS information, but if it's off, what ends up happening is the Android operating system has to turn that GPS chip on, and then it has to start acquiring satellites. And I don't remember off the top of my head how many satellites it needs to acquire in order to get an actual location. I want to say 6, it could be 8. And if you have 12, I do believe 12 is a good number of satellites to have. Once it has those satellites, it'll actually give you a real location, and it'll call you back. And the nice thing is it's a black box. You don't have to worry about how it works, just the fact that once you have your listener set up, it'll pass in a location, in which case you can get the location, latitude and longitude, and other information such as speed. But that's how that works. So you have to call this first in order to listen for that.
I have that in my maps activity, and I'm getting an error under the start location reporting method, and it says a non-static method cannot be referenced from a static context.
Yep. So if you've copied this line of code, so the question was about static methods. That's a Java question. So I've declared this method as static because it uses no instance variables of my class, meaning you don't have to create a new instance of that class in order to run this method. So to put that into code speak, I can do things like this. I can make this is a class method now,
or that's where I had that Piazza thing where I said, do I need to do a new buildings controller?
Yep, and so I think I responded that you don't call new on buildings controller. You don't create a new buildings controller because there's no point. Again, I'm not using any instance variables, and if I am, I set those instance variables to static, which then become class members or static members. There's like a million names for these things, depending upon what language you're in or when you got your CS degree, or because I've heard the name change over the past couple of years. So anyway, yeah. So the reason why I declare it as public static is so that you can do things like this: buildings controller start location reporting. Because what I can also do is stop that location reporting. If I want to conserve battery power, I don't need the location anymore, I can stop that. And I can stop that within any one of my classes. And this is what we call singletons, or it's a singleton pattern at least. And the singleton pattern allows me to make this call wherever without having to create new and having different versions of this thing hanging around. Because this buildings controller is a single object that I can access anywhere, but also has a single instances of all my buildings or locations inside of that. So everything in that class is static. So there's only one.
It should be at the top of your buildings controller class. I don't have the static there. Should I add that
to the class declaration?
Yeah, no, I have just public class also.
Yep, that's all you need for static. Well, the class itself is not static. Okay. The objects within it are static. So the methods are static. The members are static. But actually, you can mix and match. You can have static members within classes. Class instances, I should say, that share one object.
So in my maps activity in the onCreate, I'm doing buildings controller dot start location
Yep.
recording, and I'm getting an error saying, something about static that I can't, the non-static.
So if you've copied and pasted that code out, copy and pasted this guy, right? Is that what you've done?
Yes.
So this code that I've highlighted is in your maps activity?
It's in my buildings controller.
Oh, okay.
You're in your buildings controller.
Yeah, you're in your buildings controller
Yep.
right now. I have that same start locations recording in my buildings controller.
Okay, so read the error message to me again.
The error message is a maps activity when I'm trying to actually call that method, and it says non-static method start location recording Android.content.context cannot be referenced from a static context.
Okay, so and this one is declared as public static void. The one in your, I mean, I imagine it is if you've copied the code. Just want to double check that.
Oh, I don't think it has a static. How did I not get that? Let me try that. Sorry.
Okay, yep. So that's the Java compiler saying, yeah, you're doing a member class method, but it's not a class method. It's an instance method. So
That fixed it.
yeah, these are language constructs that are, kind of hidden gems within the languages.
I see that now. Yeah, I feel like I know I'm hazy on what static means. I think this is a little bit.
Static is basically saying this like a static method.
Okay.
You can't see it anywhere else.
Okay. How
Yeah.
does that relate to public and private? Because I thought that's what public, protected, and private said was where it can be seen.
It's the class only can see it. And private, like if the method was private, that just means no other class can see it.
Yeah, so what I was just going to say about this is I have an array in the buildings controller to hold all of my arrays. If I wanted to, for different purposes, create multiple instances of my buildings controller, or maybe I had an object called buildings and I wanted to share one single object amongst all of those instances, I can declare inside the same class a static array like I've done here, but every time I do like new on an instance, creating a new instance, those objects will share that same object. So if I change that object, every one of these guys will also have that same data. Let's see, I'm trying to remember a good example of when they teach about static members. It's a piece of data that's declared inside the class that all of the instances know about.
Okay. I think that clears it up a little bit more.
Okay, yeah, you could do a quick. I mean, it's not a really large concept to know. So if you want to Google that to figure out what it actually is, and they'll probably give you a better example than I can come up off the top of my head. But
We did study that in CS402.
I know. That was one of those things I'm always just like, sure, public static. I know that void is what it returns. I'm sure on that part. So.
When it's in real context, then it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure. Even the 402 students are like, yeah, I've kind of seen that before. And if you're developing your own applications, you really never need to use static members, static methods, but it's really, really powerful if you use it properly. So, yeah. But we got that error working or fixed.
Yeah, thank you.
No, yeah, absolutely. I don't know, yeah, why that was missing, but. Now you know how to fix that. Whenever it complains about calling a non-static method, either add static or declare an instance of it and then call that method on that instance. Cool. What else you guys got for questions? So it did kill my no more logging.
Do you
log.
mind talking us through how to add pins?
Sure.
So how the user add pins?
Yep. So adding pins to the map.
Are you also recording this or no?
I started when we talked about cameras and trying to crash
It's
cameras.
fuzzy though. I just wanted to make sure it's good to look back over it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let me do this. I will show you, because I could go back through the notes and show you where it is in the notes and how to add pins. It's on the notes in maps, but let me show you the way I work because it's the best way. Not the best way, but it's fast at least. Again, it's not what you know, it's how fast you can look it up. So what I want to do in this particular example is in my onCreate. Actually, that's not true. Not in my onCreate. Let me talk about life cycles and fragments for a second here. If you're starting the Google Maps template, the onCreate actually sets up your fragment, but your fragment is not yet ready. So if you look at this particular piece of code, what it's saying is create the, well, let's step through this one thing at a time. So it's saying get the support fragment manager. You might also see it say get fragment manager. The support just means it's going to be backwards compatible to earlier versions of the Android SDK. And so this method actually changes depending upon what version of the SDK you're compiling against. And so what this passes back is a support map. Well, excuse me, I forgot one line here. So that's getting the fragment manager, even though it's called support fragment manager. That's going to pass back the manager so that you can then look up the fragment by ID. And this is very similar to the way that we look up buttons and text edit fields for activities, but we have to do it specifically on a fragment. We have to let the Android operating system know what fragment what button or text edit field we're looking for in which fragment. So let me just draw a quick diagram here for our UI. We have a maps fragment, and then maybe outside of that we have either another fragment that has buttons in it or something like that. So this is a fragment, that's a fragment. In order to look up the different widgets, the UI widgets within each fragment, we have to first get the fragment that we're talking about. So if we want this button, we have to get its container fragment first, and that's the way we're doing that. And so the nice thing about Android Studio is it sets all this up for us, so we don't have to really think about it too much. But it is asking for the fragment or the element in the fragment called map as an ID of map, so we're looking that up. And then finally, we're storing that into a variable that is of type support map fragment because it's backwards compatible to earlier versions of the SDK. But what it's doing with that is then it's saying get the map asynchronously, and then it goes off and does whatever it is. And then sometime later, maybe 1 millisecond, maybe 1 second, maybe 10 seconds later, it gives you a callback. If you've actually gone through all the source code and read it or read the comments, on map ready means the map has loaded, because sometimes that takes a little bit of time to load and then actually get displayed. This callback gets called, and then it passes in an instance of that Google map. And so this is where we want to add initially our pins. Later on, when the user adds his or her pins, then you would want to do it on that click event. If you have pins already in the system, that sort of thing. But if you're loading them from a web service, that web service again takes some time to load those pins, and then you parse the data, everything like that. So for Project 2, you probably don't want to put your pins in this, but you can get a instance of when this says, okay, the map is ready, it stores it in a member variable, mmap, and so that's declared if you started with the Google Map template. And now you have an instance of this, but also you in this code, you can do anything else that you want to do with your map. You can zoom in to Boise, you can zoom in to wherever the current location is of the user, etc., etc. For our example,
This is where we're adding the initial pins, and then you set
if you have initial pins that are not being loaded from the web service, because again, the web service takes an additional set of time, so you probably want to do it here.
Why would we have that for this project?
The web service?
Initial pins that are not being added by the web service.
You wouldn't. But if, for instance, you wanted just to have a pin on the map. So I'm just extending the use case a little bit, and I'm going to show you the quick and easy way to do this. And so what we use are on our Google map. So if you just call mmap, what you can do is just hit dot and you can see all the different methods that you can call on it. Usually the add is where you actually add stuff to. So I'll type in add, and then you can type in, or you can look down to see marker. That's probably what I want. Marker options. And so it's looking for a marker option. And so let me go a line, let me comment that out for a second. Go a line above that, since it's looking for a marker option. Let me go ahead and create a marker options variable. And on this one we call new marker options. Okay, and then on my marker options, I'm going to do the dot, and it's gonna. I can scroll through this list, but usually, okay, or not usually. Let's see, for this guy. Okay, yeah, this is using a slightly different pattern. So, if you're familiar with Android, this is, you might know this, but if you're not, you can look up the documentation. But this is usually how I try to leverage my Android Studio tools. So when you construct the marker objects, you use the builder pattern to chain these together. So it's asking for a title. I'm just going to say new pin. And if we want to add a description, description is not, what's it called? Like subtitle or snippet? Yeah, snippet. So we're going to set the snippet, which is going to appear under our title. So snippet text here. And then it's going to ask for, let's see, we need to set the location. Why can't I remember these things? Position. Okay, and I forgot to look at the type, which was probably lat long. Yep, so it's asking for a lat long position, which I don't have, so let me comment that out. And the reason I comment it out, because sometimes if your code has errors in it, autocomplete won't work. So it's asking for a lat long object, so I'm just going to type in lat long, create a new, I'm just going to say current location equals new lat long, and it's asking for latitude and longitude as doubles. I'm just going to pass in 0, well, let's get the Sydney one here.
Would it be easy enough to save a user's text as a snippet? Or can you make like a, I don't know, can you have users alter the snippet that happens underneath the?
Would that be where we go and get the text from the text edits and put it in there?
Yeah, you'd probably store that in an object first, and then pull it out from the object. I guess I could have showed you the code down here because it does almost exactly the same thing. But I wanted to show you how this works. This code adds a marker in Sydney. But I'm typing this out like this. So the position I'm looking for is current location. That sort of thing. So instead of adding in this hard-coded data here, what you'd probably do is say somewhere in your code, buildings controller, get locations, that'll return an array, and then you get some index on that, and let's just say 0, and I don't have any in there, so it'll come back as 0, but this is going to be a, what's this pass?
Could you get the current location? Because I saw that was an option when it pulled up.
Yeah, yep. But this is going to pass back a location model, and so what I'm going to show you is location model, and just
So is there any risk of the building's controller not being able to have gone on location yet?
Yep.
If you're doing this?
absolutely. So you always want to check that. So instead of hard-coded values, I'd get that from my location model, or whatever you named your. So this one has a description, so I have a location description. And then instead of current location, I would pass in that location models get location coordinates, and that passes back a lat long. So that's great. So that'll create a object or a pin, excuse me, at that location. Actually, I can delete this. This is just going to be the first location in my buildings controller. Now, if you were doing all the pins, you would loop through that array that comes back. Let's see, so there's that. Now if I ran this, I would, well, let's go see what it would actually do. There's no locations in there. Okay, so yeah, I need to. So this is how you move the camera. So the code should already be in there. Okay, so it's just going to move to that position after I add the pin. Okay, so that crashed. So let's look at the... I don't have... Yeah, but I'm wondering where the stack trace... Oh, okay, because I have a filter on it. There we go. Okay, there's my stack trace. Yeah, if you don't have any code, or if you don't have any stuff in there, check your filter. That's right here. As I say, maybe I have filtering on, and indeed I did. Okay, so the stack trace for this one, you start at the top, and it says index out of bounds exception, invalid index, size is 0. Yes, because our buildings controller doesn't actually have any locations in it, and I can actually go to that line of code, which is line 56, and that's using my get 0, so it's trying to get that first index, and it's crashing. So that's, I knew that was going to happen. So let's go ahead and just to get this working, which I suggest you guys do for your application, rather than trying to get all these different pieces working together, hard code some of them. And so, for example, I don't have the web services working that's pulling my JSON and then parsing that. So what I'm going to do is when I go ahead and create this locations object, which should be, let's see, where do I call, okay. So what I want to do is probably in the get location. Let me do this. I'm going to, initially I'm creating the array, so there's always an array there. But let's say I do that, and then I say if my locations array equals null, meaning this is the first time I'm calling this method or trying to get the locations. I'm going to set the locations array to a new array, but then what I'm going to do is add some dummy information in here, which again you'd get from the web service, but I'm going to go ahead and create a location model, just say new location model. You can name it something better than that, of course, new location model, and then saying new location model dot set, and that'll bring up your set methods. Set name to new location. I'm not going to do the one, I'm just going to do the coordinate here, so it's asking for a lat long. I'm going to pass in a new lat long object and pass in, do I still have that? Nope. I'm just going to pass in Sydney again. So if you remember, I haven't added a pin yet. I'm just going to copy this Sydney address, so I actually have a real GPS location. Pass that in, and then I have to add that to the array. So locations array dot add, and then I pass that in. Location model. There it is. And so now when I first get my locations array, it's going to say, oh well, it's null because this is the first time that it's being called. It's going to instantiate it and then put one location in there, and then it's going to pass it back. Now the next time this passes through, I get this again some later on down the road. it won't be null. It'll skip over that entire else statement and just pass back the array. So this is just a nice way of passing in data or setting data for your initial application as you're working through this before you get the web services working. Because if you try to get all these pieces working and then try to glue them together at the end, you're going to find that they mismatch. And so the way that I work is I'll hard code the data initially. And of course, this is not going to work with.
Can you show the code again for
Absolutely. Yes. This one? Yep. So I did not include my API key for some reason. So the tiles are not coming up. Do you still need a code up on the screen? Okay. All right, so to get that, just copy this line of code from your Google Maps API. Hopefully you've done this already. I'm going to switch over to Firefox. Paste that into my URL, little bar thingy. Omnibar is what they call it. And make sure I'm on the right account. I'm going to just use my BSU account. Not that it matters. And I'm actually going to paste that in one more time because I think I lost the initial task that it was trying to execute. I have no idea what these things are. I'm just going to go ahead and create a new project. Oh, I switched back to my. Okay, whatever. You can always delete these later. Like if you create a new project, you want to delete it later. Okay, so it takes a couple seconds. The API is now enabled to go get the credentials. And then once the credentials are created, what it's going to ask you for is the name of this. So I'm just going to say BSU maps for class. And it's going to ask you for a package name. That package name comes from, if you ever need to look this up, your Android manifest file. Way at the top here, and this is the name of my package. If you want to change this, like if you when you publish your app to the Google Play Store, this is what actually goes in the URL field. So make sure that this is appropriate for the application that you're publishing. And since I used that string from the XML file, this automatically populates with all this information. So all that's right. I'm just going to go ahead and hit create to get the API key. And because I'm live streaming this API key goes out to the entire internet. But what I can do is later after class, I can then click that and delete it and create a new API key. So that's the nice thing about having API keys is you can disable them and then push out a new API key. But I'm not too worried about it for this thing. No, so what would happen is if they had the same package name, there's not too much that would happen. If they had the same package name in their Android app, they could then use you have a quota of how many tiles you can request from Google. Like it's something ridiculous, like 10,000 tiles per day. It's quite a lot. Any more than you have to pay for it. Somebody else could use that or potentially do other things with that service. Yeah, so anyway, just paste that in there, make sure there's no white space around it. I think Android takes care of the white space, but I never like to assume. So let's do that, and then finally let's just run this again. And also, if you're making an application for a client and you're using an API key on your own account, I wouldn't recommend that. I would ask them to use like a company Gmail account, or not Gmail, but a Google account, so that they can handle that themselves. So that's all I had to do to enable that. And for some reason, Okay, no pins. Let's go back to Android Studio. Where is my maps activity? Oh, okay. Silly me. I was creating the pin, but I never actually added it. So let's just put in the marker options there. And now let's try rerunning that. My pin should be in Sydney, Australia, which is pretty much the code that was in there in the first place, but mine gets it from the buildings controller rather than the hard-coded data, like you see. So there we go. That's just the one I created initially. So now that I know that works, what I would do is I would go over to, let's close some of these guys, my web services controller. And it looks like I've set most of this up already. Okay, so my buildings controller, add location. Okay, that all works. I assume it works because I did it last time. Okay, so what we're going to do is every time, so the web services is going to download that JSON file. It's going to parse it. You can see how I'm parsing it, how I'm getting that information. It's in the course notes, of course. But I'm just going through that. What I really want to concentrate on is this add location method on my buildings controller. So again, I'm calling this buildings controller within my code. I don't have to create an instance of it. I don't have to get a reference to it. And I'm just saying add location. I'm passing in the current location that it just created. So this is a for loop. So this will get called many, many, many times. So add location will get called many times. So let's jump over there. I closed it. Let's open that back up. And if we scroll up to the add location, you can see that, well, actually it's not it's not doing anything at this moment because the source code that I wanted to provide you, I didn't want to actually do everything for you. But let me show you how this works. I would just do locations array dot add and then just add the new location. Or I'm sorry, this is coming in. Wrong method. This is an overloaded method, so add location, it should be called add locations because you're passing in an array of locations. But here's the one I care about, add location. Okay, so that one actually is adding the location there. It is then using a event bus event and passing that event up. And so I do believe that in my maps controller, on event, get locations. Okay, so I wasn't actually doing anything with that, but let's actually do something with that. It is passing back a array list of location models. So let me go ahead and get that array list of location model objects. And it's just going to call this locations. Okay, so this code that I've written is really no longer useful for me because now I have web services working. So let me refactor this. Let me pull this out into a new method. So refactor, right click on it, refactor, go to extract, and then go to method. Or you can use the shortcut key, which I need to learn one of these days. And get location model. I'm just going to call this set location pin. And actually, I want to show you a trick, so I'm going to cancel that real quickly. What I want to do is instead highlight this because I want to pass in location model as a parameter. And if I leave that off, you can see location model is actually declared inside of the code that I'm going to highlight. So when I refactor this to a method, I'm going to say set location pin is the model. And if you notice, this is what it's creating. It's passing in that location model as a parameter. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that. And now I've created this new method. It's going to pass this in. And it's replacing the code that I highlighted with an actual call to that method with this location. So it's creating the location model, then passing that in. The reason I wanted to do that is because I want to pull this code out. I don't actually want to do anything in my on map ready because I need to wait for the web services now, so I'm going to comment all that out. Now on this event, because this is event bus, and this is why I'm stressing this so much, is when web services is ready, it's going to pass in these location objects. What I can do is then get that location object instead of, well, you can do it this way and then loop through the array. I'm gonna do it the cheap way just to make sure it's working. Add location event. I need to get that location out of there, and so we have a location model that's inside that event. Okay, so now I'm pulling that out of the event that's being passed into my method via event bus. Current location, and instead of using that buildings controller, actually I don't need to do that anymore. I can just pass that in just like that. And so because I've already written that code to get it to work, to get the pins working, I just refactored that out. I've pulled that method out, or I pulled that code into its own method. Now I can call that just as easily as this, and this is why we put stuff into methods so we can reuse our code. I'm getting this current location from the event, and that event is generated when that web services, that for loop, parses the JSON, creates a single location, and then passes that up to the buildings controller via the add method. The add method is calling this event. Okay, so let's see what happens when I run this. Alternatively, again, you can grab, while it's compiling, you can grab the array, all of the locations from the buildings controller, and then loop through that. I'm doing it the lazy way, and it's going to crash on me. Null pointer, print line needs a message. Okay, I have no idea where that is, so let me go down my stack, and sure enough, what this is going to show you is this is the calling line, so this is in my listener, but if I go back up the stack, this is the actual location. So you can go up the stack to see who actually called this. And for some reason, there was an error on that, or there was an exception on that, and get localized message. Okay, let me just comment that out. Let me do something better. I'm going to put a breakpoint there, comment that back in. So I want that to execute, but I want to actually see what that exception is. The exception has an exception. I could probably just do get string there. Oop, so instead of run, I need to hit the debug or command or control D, or yeah, control D. And that says it's not running, so let me hit that again. Okay, so we're in our for loop here. I'm just going to play through that.
I get that message a lot.
I think I,
Stopped.
yeah. Okay, so maybe I thought it was, this is why I like to step through my code. So I had a breakpoint on the for loop for some reason, so if I step over that and step through the code and just look to see where it's crashing. So right before it calls this, I'm going to look at my current location model. Make sure everything, yep, Bronco Stadium has coordinates in there, perfect. Now if I step into this code, add location is going to add it to the array. Oh, but you know what? I changed the code, so I think arrays, yep, location array is null. So this is why I stepped through every single line of code, because I realized I changed the code on the get locations array, and on the get locations array, it's actually it's null. So it's trying to call add on a null object. So let me undo the code change that I made, which is essentially just pre-populating it with that single location, because now I have web services working. Let me rerun this code and that should work. Oh, wait, one more thing I got to do. I have to reinitialize that to a new array list of, I'm just going to put a location model in there. Okay, so that crashed again, no big deal. But again, those breakpoints and stepping through every single line of code is super important, because yeah, it said something about print line needing a message, but that wasn't the error. That's what we like to refer to as a red herring. That was not what it was really supposed to be. Okay, so it stopped on my for loop, and now as I step through this code, back to, so it's created it, it's parsed it, it's now created this location model, it's populated it with a name, description, and a latitude and longitude. After I've created that, I'm going to add it to my buildings controller. It does that via the add location, passes that in via this method, and then it's going to add it to the array. And now that it's added to the array, I can call this event, or I can create this event, and then tell event bus about the event. And if I play through this code, okay, it's going to just keep calling the for loop. Let's see my maps. Okay, I noticed as I was stepping through my code that Genymotion's screen was blank. So I think that's because I was trying to add pins to the map that wasn't actually ready. So if you have that error, or actually, okay, so let me back up. I don't have any pins added to the map where I expect them to be. So let me set a breakpoint on this event to make sure the event's being called in the first place. And again, this is how I work. And so hopefully this helps you kind of debug your application.
Stop you for a second.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
asked about that method get location. That's a get. Is that a getter that's part of the buildings controller?
No, this is just part of the add location event that I've declared. This is my own method. And I just have a getter on that model, that location model. So the event just has a single object in it that I'm storing that newly added location.
Okay, mine's called get end location. So if I change, does that mean I'm wrong? It should be called get end location since it's an end location.
You can
model?
call your method whatever you want. It just should be returning whatever your member is called. In this case, mine's called location model. I don't know if I've set up Android Studio to set my getters to ignore that M. I think I've done that. So yeah, if yours says get M location, don't worry about it. It's just I've set mine up differently because I like to call it get location rather than having that M in there. I forget how I did that, but it's in the preferences somewhere. But yeah, good question. So, all right, so it looks like it has fired my event bus on event method. So that's great. Let me inspect the parameter here. You can hover over, look at it, or you can look at it down here. And it's saying that the location model is actually null. So that's actually a problem. Or let me step over this code just to... Yeah, okay. So the event that's being passed in is null, which is not good. Let's see. All right, so I'm going to step back into this piece of code. And make sure that it's not this piece of code that's getting executed. Let me go back. Yeah, so I'm putting breakpoints there. I think I know what's going on, but I'll show you how I work. So Control D, just in case you don't know. And Control D again. There's a little message that pops up that says the debugger's not ready, and it stops, so I just hit it again to run it. Okay, so yeah, indeed it is calling this, and my new location event oh. Okay, so what I've done is I've gone back up the stack and see that, yeah, my add location event's being called, my on event's being called, but I'm not actually populating that event with the data. So that's what the code was telling me, but I didn't believe it. So all I have to do is just do set location and then set the actual new location. So for whatever reason, maybe because I was talking while I was coding, I just didn't actually set the location. So that's why, again, we debug, because what ends up happening is things that you assume were working or things that you were assumed had been set aren't actually set or working. So again, what I assumed was there was not there. So if we go over here, here's all of our pins. And if I zoom in on that, I center that a little bit better, and then good old Idaho. Oops. So if you double click and move your mouse up and down, you can zoom in. Oh, come on. And then sometimes what happens is you do some weird combination and it brings up whatever that was. Okay. So we only have 3 locations in our JSON object, so this is working perfectly. Now what ends up happening with when you add your own user location, you want to add the pin to the map. So I can have this work exactly as is and just listen for that event in my maps location, and that's fine. So we do have a details activity here. I do not have a button for some reason. Let me go to my activity content details here. Oh, sorry, on my activity details. Oh, this is not using fragments? It's a single fragment. Okay. I don't know. These projects are all different for some reason. Usually it sets it up where you have your activity details and your content details. For some reason when I created this, it just created one of those layouts for me. So I think I tried to do this last time. Tried to add the fragment there. It was not working. That is because my map is contained in this. So let me see if I can get this working. Let's put this in a linear vertical layout instead. No, I can't do that. Okay. In fear of breaking and taking too much time, let me recreate this. This is going to be my maps. Activity maps. I'm just going to call it 2. And let me just go ahead and create this from scratch. So, okay, it's already vertical. I think I do that here. Yeah, mixing these are not very nice. Should be title, right? Text. Okay, well, we're out of time. If you guys want to leave, you're more than welcome to, but I'm going to just set this up so that you can add a user pin.
Do you want us to, I don't know if I should submit what I have, or, because it's not everything we want, and I don't even think it's working.
It's a good question. So, yeah, if you think, well, for you guys that are here that had problems that are not done, that I know you've been working on it for a while, I'm more than happy to give the extension that you need. For future reference, if you guys, you know, you just ran into the deadline, you didn't prepare, you know, whatever. The question is it easy? Is it better to submit it late and get the 30% or 30% penalty? 20? Whatever the syllabus says. Yeah, sorry. I don't mean to scare you. Whatever the syllabus says, that's the law of the land.
It doesn't say? I thought you said 20 on the first.
Okay, the first slide. I think it is 20.
I don't know, I thought I heard 10.
No.
No, I'm being real here.
No. It's a pretty significant one, just because I want people to turn things in on time. Okay, so it's 20. Whether you want that, if you can work on it later, turn it in later, and do it 100%, and get an 80 on it, then turn it in late. If you think it's pretty much there, but I think it's about 10 points off, or just missing this tiny little thing. And you can ask me about it, like, hey, I'm missing this one thing. What's that gonna take? Like, I'm not handling rotation. I'll be like, that's probably 10 points, 5 points, something like that. Then turn it in, because then you'll get a 90 or 95, depending upon how I grade that. So if you're close, submit it, and then oftentimes what I'll do is I'll allow you to do bug fixes to it, which for half credit. So if you want to fix that, if you submit in as 90%, then you can fix whatever problem you had. Like if you weren't handling rotation, you can resubmit it. I'll give you 50% back on those bug fixes, but not on late penalties. So if you submit it late, it's late.
So should we just submit it, what we have, and then finish it and resubmit it?
You sounded like you felt like giving a slight extension
Yeah,
for
I
this
thought
one.
there
Yeah.
was an extension.
And then I say, was that extension not including?
To you guys, yeah, the guys that are here that you've been working on. I know you guys have been working on because you've been asking me questions, and I know that the tool's giving you trouble. Yeah, you can have the extension. I've said that. I'm just saying for future reference.
Okay.
Or if you're going to miss the extension.
Will it extend until the weekend? Or?
Send me an email, and I'll talk to you on an individual basis about that. Yeah, because some people will just ask me for the extension. I'll be like, you guys haven't been working on it. I say, well, I had a party this weekend. And
Yeah, because I don't mind sending you like the code that I have, and so you can see that I've.
yeah, no, I know you guys have been working on it. No doubt.
What I do have, but I don't, this doesn't get much credit. You get 2 points.
It's all they get.
So,
Yes, this? Okay. All right, so what I've done, again, you guys are free to leave if you want to stick around and just watch me work through the entire project. I'm happy to stay a little bit later. So what I've done is I've enabled that details activity via button. I don't know where that button went. I could have swore I called it before. No pointer exception. Beautiful. Okay, so that's in my maps activity 35.
Like, do you want us to submit what we have then and continue to work on it this time since we said extension, or just?
Yeah,
continue to
just submit it, and if there's something that you guys are having issues on, just let me know and I can pull your code and look at it. Like if your camera's not working, I can pretty easily find what that is. But also try to post a Piazza. It's kind of late now in the process to do that, but other students probably having issues with it. Okay, so what I actually did, I don't know if that was clear, I added my own layout because my layout wasn't letting me add my own button. So I created my own layout, but I forgot to set the layout that the activity is using for this. And so we do that via this guy here. So this layout has a name called Activities Maps, but this one, which I get from the name, but I've called it Maps or Activity Maps 2. And we go back to our Maps activity. So all I have to do is hopefully just change that name. Yep, there it is. It's populated, so that should work. Because what was happening was I was trying to get a reference to the add button, and then when I was setting the click listener on it, it was telling me that there was a null pointer exception on line 35. So line 35 is this, meaning add button was null, and I knew why it was null because I was hitting the wrong, there's no add button in that first layout, so I'm changing the layout. Anyway.
Mike, what do you have to do the second layout that you made?
How do I add that?
Well, what's in activity map 2? I missed that.
Oh, okay. So I just went into the, so I created a new layout. So I went into layout, Command N, did layout resource file, and just gave it a new name. I accepted all the defaults, and it created, essentially it created this guy. So it gave me a linear layout as a base root element. I'll show you that in a second. And I pasted that in there. And it's essentially what you always get. But what that gave me is a, here's the hierarchy of layouts. So inside my linear layout, I have an add button and a map button. If I change the hierarchy, if I change the order of this, my add button goes below my map. My map is going to expand. Right now it's just a little thin line for some reason. But if I look at my thing, here's the add button. If I rerun that because I've changed the hierarchy here, you can also drag it around on your UI, but it's sometimes easier to do it this way because it's hard to select buttons here sometimes and drag them in place.
Could you have just added a linear layout to activity maps?
It wasn't letting me.
It wasn't up.
I probably could have done it via code, via the XML here. Yeah, let me go ahead and try that, see if that works. Just in case you guys have the same issue.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just like to start afresh with a new file. Then I got to go back to my maps activity and reload the starting layout. And this is very powerful, by the way, guys. If this set content view is setting the actual XML file that the activity is using. So if you want to have an if statement in here to decide which layout you want to use, you know, depending upon many factors, you can change it there. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I wasn't here when what's the point of using that bus?
That's a whole class topic.
No, just a basic description of it.
Yeah, it's an event. Stuff that happens over here can happen, gets notified over here without connecting two class references to each other. So you don't have to pass references of a class back and forth. So if you noticed in my buildings controller, there's no reference back to the maps activity or any activity in general. This will be clear a little bit more. Let me put that map button, because I think what's happening is the map fragment is taking, oops. This map fragment is taking the entire, okay, now that's taking, so I'm running back into that same thing. So let's go back into code and actually just put that button above my fragment, because the fragment's taking up the entire layout and then it won't let me add it. So this is normally not the way I would do it, but for this, yeah, okay. So the button above worked, the button below did not. Could not start. Okay, I'm going to ignore that. So this is, again, why I like to start from scratch sometimes, because I don't know why that's not working. Oh, okay. Oops. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to leave that alone. So I'm not using it. Okay, there we go. So even though I wasn't using it, it was still trying to parse it and giving me errors. It was working. Oh, okay. It wasn't working. There we go. This just has to do with how the layout gets rendered, and the fragment will try to take up the entire layout, and then whatever's below it just gets blown away. Or I think it's below it. Maybe if I set the Z index, I'd have to play around with it, but I'm not going to worry about it here. Okay, so adding that launches this activity. I don't have a save button on that, unfortunately. That's weird. Okay, let me set this up. So my debug activity, I'm just going to do the title here, and then I'm going to add a button. Maybe. Custom view. Oh, I don't know how I set this up. I'm sorry. Let me just edit this in code. So we have our coordinate. Okay. Let's show you how to do a layout from scratch. Linear layout and title. And then inside here we do Android. Oh yeah, we need that schema in there. So we put that here. You know what, I'm going to do this for now. Just copy this guy because I don't have to type all this out. Okay, so there's my linear layout. Now I can add my button. I can add my text view here. And that's good to go. Let me set this to save button, details activity. Okay. Oh, what? Yeah, okay. Let's set this up slightly differently. Set on click list. Okay, match up all your braces and parentheses. Okay, so all this is doing is just grabbing from the text edit, which I didn't rename. Oh, come on. Oh, shoot. Okay. I know what that was trying to do. I was worried about it not working, and I forgot I put it in the wrong place. Okay, so this is name text edit. That's fine. So the code was right. Okay, so all this is doing is just looking for the save. When I click save, it's going to grab the text that's in the text field. Obviously, you'd have two text fields with a camera button and all that fun stuff, but that's all this is going to do. And then it's going to add that location. It's going to get the current user's location, which I don't know if that's set up, and hopefully it is. So let me just hit a breakpoint there. And this should be almost all you need for project 2.
Make that sound so easy.
I know, right? I'm watching that like. It makes sense when you watch, you know? When you get home and you look at your code and you're like, oh, what?
Yeah. Okay, so that one.
Explain it to somebody and have them code it. My life would be much easier. You need to do this. So now,
Yeah.
You want a project manager type?
oh, absolutely. Yeah, I manage people all day long. That's it. I'm good at that. Well, thank you for going over.
Yeah, no problem. I know it's getting late.
I already emailed you.
Okay.
Requests.
Just to show you this really quickly, so I'm going to add new location from new activity. When I hit that save button, what actually it's going to get called there. It's going to hit this breakpoint, so it's going to pull all those data, all that information out and set the description here. Description is blank, so it's going to construct an object and then pass that object to my buildings constructor, just like my web services controller was doing. Let me play through that, but then you'll also notice, hopefully, okay, crashed. Yeah, and sometimes it doesn't give you the debug.
This is saving it, you said?
Yeah, this is pulling it before it crashed. No, just the activity crashed. Okay, let me try this again. Okay, I have something set up strangely here.
This is the logic. Is your live stream still going?
Yep. Even with all the errors I'm making. Okay, so here's the...
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, this is null, so just to get it to work, I am going to say name here. So it's not grabbing it from the text field. I'll get that to work later, but just to make sure that I know that the second activity is passing it back to the first activity via event bus. Again, this is how I work. It's just I don't try to spend too much time on trying to figure out why that text edit field is not passing back my string. I just need to get this to work. So whatever I type in there, it doesn't matter. I hit the say. Line 46. What? It's so weird. Ha ha ha. I don't know why. Play through that. Okay, so at this point I'm going to look through everything, make sure everything looks good. So location model. Location model looks populated, that's fine. I'm going to step into this current line of code. And location string equals new here. And location name, set that equal to this. Okay, that looks fine. Okay, description, blank, sure, step over that. That looks fine. Alright, so here's where we might have the issue. Let me step into that. So return current location is null. Okay, that's fine. But when I try to pass that in, it'll break. So let me go back to my details activity. And again, I don't necessarily want to try to mess with this, so I'm just going to create a basic one. We're just going to grab the one that we get. Oh, I deleted that code. Oh no, here it is. Just to get it to work as fast as I can. Again, hard coding your data helps a lot with initial development because when you try to hook everything up, this is what happens is for some reason, my web service or my location's not being called and yada yada yada. I just want to make sure this is working. Hit save. Okay, I don't have any breakpoints, so everything looks good. Now if I go back to my map, you can see that pin is now added in Sydney, Australia. So just to prove that is what happened, let me debug it. And then I promise I'll stop. Come on. If that happens, just rerun it. Sometimes it takes forever. Connection refused. Rerun it again. Third time's a charm. And okay, so my on events are getting called for my web services, so I'm going to play through that because there's 3 of them. And now when I add the pin, actually let me go back. Just make sure, say no Australia, no Sydney. When I add it, and I type in whatever, and I hit save, it goes through that on click, and I'm going to play through that. And again, this just works the same way as my web services. This on event gets called in my maps activity. Inside of that add location event is that Sydney address. I add that pin, hit play. But you notice nothing happens. You want to call finish on that save button in that method that it is, but if we go back that way, you can see that pin's now added. And so this is a really nice way, again, of passing data back and forth or anywhere without having to get a reference to the initial class. So, all right, hopefully that was useful for you guys.
Does finish get parentheses?
Yep, so let me just put that in. So after the on click, we just do finish. Hit save, run that. This will pop up again. Okay, add, type in whatever, doesn't matter, hit save. And because I called finish, it finishes that activity. Okay, so if you want to kill the activity at the same time, then you can do that, or if not, then obviously don't put that in there. Okay, so I can show you that code as you walk out the door. And then obviously this is hard coded. I then, now that I know that's working, I would then go and make sure, whatever reason, my text edit's not actually pulling back that data.
Instead of saving all of that to a string called name and then passing name and your location model across that location, could you just put in that name text edit.get text.toString?
I could, but for project 2, you want a name field, you want a description field, and then the current location. And so oftentimes when you have multiple data being passed back and forth, you want to actually wrap that into an object, a Java object. And that's what I'm doing here with the location model. I'm wrapping the name, the description, and then the coordinate into one object, and then passing that one object back. So I'm just wrapping everything up into one nice, neat package.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Hopefully that helps. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
Just a second.
Yeah, no rush.
Yeah,
I'm gonna-
finish mine now with that. I think all I have left to do is get to the current location and then actually register to save the data. At least I think that's all I have.
Okay. For me, I can stick around for a little bit. Oh, go ahead if you.
As far as the picture part, the project description is a little unclear. So all they're doing is, launching a camera and able to take a picture and saving it to the object that it's storing, or are they displaying it somehow when you click the pin?
So I'll show you. So I did talk about this in class a couple times, but so in your details activity, this would be the name of the location. You have the description of the location. Then also in here you'd have a button
Yep.
for the camera.
So I've got
Okay.
that button. It's taking a picture,
Yep.
it's saving it, it's even displaying it on
Yep.
that page.
Yep.
Are we doing anything
Nope.
past that? Okay.
Yeah. So just have it displayed.
And
Here.
all the pin displays then when you tap on the map is just the name
And the description.
And the description.
Yep.
Okay. So how do you add the description field to that?
Okay. Yeah, I added that, but I didn't actually talk about it.
Or I mean, you can just give me a quick.
Yeah. No. Let me go back.
show me
So it needs to say it by the pin on the map. What it is.
So yeah, let me show you what I'm expecting. I did kind of skip over that. So if you click on the pin, it has the title and the description.
Yeah.
Okay, and the way that I've done that, is that your question? How do I? Okay. In my method that I've created, which is way at the bottom, set pin location. When I create those marker options, I set the title, and then I set what's called the snippet. Yeah, that word always escapes me. I'm always like description, subtitle.
And it's location model dot get location description. Is that it?
With that.
The end of that code?
Yeah, because
Oh, and
I'm
it's the
dynamically
position, too.
populating that. Yep. And then the position. So yeah, it's a chained. What I can do is nope, because the chaining, the builder pattern, this marker options when you create a new one, it's obviously passing back a new instance of that marker option, but then you take that marker option and then you do dot title. Theoretically, you could also do yeah, so you could do it this way as well. But what you'll often find in Android, Java is this way too in general, but Android developers love doing it this way. I think it's kind of obtruse and very, very long, but I don't know. It is kind of nice because it indents everything. You can see it's on the same object, and I mean, there's pros and cons to it, but yeah, because you're not setting a title, you're just calling title, and I don't know. It kind of breaks the whole pattern of getters and setters. But yeah, that's how you do it. It's just called snippet. So you set the title, the snippet, and the position. No. You should normally. I'm not going to check for grading purposes. One thing you might want to do is just simply check that when that get current location comes back null. Well, there's a couple ways to check that. One, you need to check the permission to see if the user even gave you permission for that. Two is to make sure that you have a location, that the GPS has reported a location, and if not, it's null. To check that null and either try again or wait for an event to come. So you get a callback, but it would be really nice to get an event. And if you're talking about like really long asynchronous events, you'd probably set up a queue. So you'd put in an event, not an event, but you say, okay, I want to add a pin, but I don't currently have the user's location. So add that pin to the queue, and then whenever the location comes in, pull off those objects from the queue or something like that. But that's just if you're really waiting around for that location, then you might want to do it that way. But usually by the time the user adds the pin, like goes to that screen, you probably have your GPS location by then.
Where do you call this set location pin? Is that when you
wherever.
hit the save?
No. So in my maps activity, I'm calling it in the on event. So I'm getting that notification that somebody somewhere added a pin. So I'm going to get that pin's information out of that event. But I was also calling that in the map ready, just to add an initial pin. I was calling that.
Okay.
So I was actually calling it here in the on map ready. So the map's ready. It's posted to the screen. I just wanted to post a pin there to make sure it was working. And I was grabbing that from the buildings controller. The buildings controller didn't have a building in there, so I hard-coded a pin in there just to make sure the connection between those two were working, and yada, yada, yada. But, yeah.
Can you go back to the last?
To where?
Oh, did you? Where you called that one the first time? There we go.
On event,
On
yep.
the on event. Okay.
Yeah, so this is getting called, and this becomes really, really nice because when you add the list view, you can basically duplicate this code in that class and have that work again without having to get the references to the different classes.
And then as far as the add button goes,
yep.
I was having the same issue that you were, where it wasn't
the layouts.
anything to the XML. So I have a button on there, but it's really ugly. I didn't touch the XML. I just programmatically added it to the left side. So there's like a bar that's an add button on the left side.
Okay.
Ways to format that more programmatically.
Yeah, let me see if I have. I should still have some stuff on
Literally,
here.
I'm just creating a button and saying add it to the content view.
Let me see. These are some other. So you can do it this way. These are like buttons with transparencies on them. That's a pretty cool way of doing that. These are former students. So yeah, some people just stuck them at the bottom. That was perfectly acceptable. Some people got creative. That looks exactly like mine. Which one was that? This one. We put at the bottom. Yep, some people did overlays with transparency. Oh, what I did want to show was, nope, not that guy. That's interesting that that pops up with the Wi-Fi. Yeah, nobody. You would, that's a good question. You would do probably a relative layout. So there's a linear layout which is either vertical or horizontal. When you add buttons on a horizontal, it just tacks them on side by side. Vertical one, it stacks them. You can have layouts within layouts. So you can have a vertical within a horizontal. Then there's also one called a relative layout. And these buttons are relative to other objects or the sides of the screen. And that way it allows you to position those a lot more freely. Let me switch over to this guy here. So this is all wrapped in a relative layout. What I can also do is, oh no, it isn't. Okay, I'm sorry. I was thinking linear. So this is in a relative layout. What this allows me to do is actually position this almost anywhere I want. And you can see that this green arrow is saying relative to that side of the device, make it 40. If you look at the code, it'll actually tell you. So align right to parent to end margin. Okay, so it sets the margin to 43 from the right of the parent, which just happens to be the root view. But that's how that works for relative. So if you wanted to do an overlay, you do something like that, which I'm dragging it just on top of the text edit view, but that's perfectly acceptable. And then when you go down to alpha, which is the transparency, and I set that to, I don't know, 0.3, you can see it kind of dims out there a little bit. There's probably actually, it'd probably be better to set the transparency of the background. So do the background color. The background color by default is gray. But what the background color also has is an alpha channel, which is the first 2 digits here. So if I wanted to change that to 33%, I don't remember what that is in hex, but let's just type in 33, hit enter. Oh wait, which one was the channel? Should be, yeah, alpha RGB 33. Oh, maybe that was just way too dark or too light. Let's do 99. It's kind of in the 50% range. Oh, I just said it here. So I do want opacity. Oh, it is? Okay, for some reason I changed it to white. Let's just make this more obvious. So red with an opacity of that. Okay, maybe that was too much. Anyway, you get the idea. So the reason I'm doing the background and not the alpha is because the background changes the button but leaves the text. So let me actually expand that a little bit so you can see. Actually, I can make this button bigger too. or maybe not. Oh, it's wrap content. Never mind. So
Sorry, I think I missed it when you were going over it. How did you get the maps back into your new XML content?
how did I get the maps?
Yeah, so you created the activity maps to XML file.
Mhm.
So you can use that.
Yep. How do I do it programmatically? Or how do I set?
Well, no, I'm thinking at this point it'll probably be easier to create a new
Yep.
XML file.
Okay, so go ahead and create the new XML file, lay it out as you normally would, and then to get the activity to actually use it, it is at the top here in your onCreate, set content view, and I just changed that to whatever the name of it was. That's the file name for it. So in this case, it was activity_maps2.